Welcome back to the Responsible Raw Materials podcast, where we explore the people and ideas shaping the future of how we source, manage, and think about raw materials. Today's episode is about something we don't always talk enough about in this space: what it actually takes to turn good intentions into real-world impact. And I'm joined by Louise, whose career has taken her across consulting, development organisations, NGOs, and ultimately into the mining sector itself, working both as an advisor and now on the operator side. What's particularly interesting about Louise's journey is that it's been driven by a very clear thread: a desire to make a tangible difference. From early work in environmental planning and marine conservation, through roles with organisations like the World Bank, to ultimately finding a home in mining, because, as she puts it, this is where you can actually make things happen. In this conversation, we explore that shift from theory to practice. We talk about what it means to be involved in a mining project from the early stages, and how being at the decision making table allows you to influence outcomes in a way that simply isn't possible from the outside. Louise shares the story of building a mining operation with Thor Explorations, starting from very early days with limited resources through to developing and operating a mine, and what that journey has taught her about responsible mining in practice. We discuss some of the key decisions made along the way, from reducing greenhouse gas emissions through fuel choices to investing time and effort into building genuine relationships with local communities rather than treating engagement as a tick box exercise. And that leads us into one of the most important themes of the episode: time. Because building trust, building capability, and building something that lasts beyond the life of a mine, none of that happens quickly. We also explore some of the more complex and often uncomfortable questions around land, ownership, cultural identity, and what it really means to operate responsibly in places where Western concepts of land and value don't necessarily apply. And finally, we look to the future. What should mining look like in 50 years' time? Can we rethink the way we extract resources altogether? And how do we ensure that what we leave behind is something positive, not just environmentally, but socially and economically as well? It's a very honest, very practical conversation, and one that is grounded in real experience. I hope you enjoy it. I'm in South Africa. I'm with the wonderful Louise, who is going to begin by telling us a little bit about her background and why she enjoys being in the world of raw materials so much. So, Louise, over to you.
Hi, yes, I'm Louise. Originally from Australia and grew up in a coal mining community, so saw the more the ugly and not so good side of mining. And I decided to become a town planner. And in Australia, planning came from a very much environment perspective. So that's where I picked up my environment work. I'm the environment and social manager with Thor Explorations, by the way, but I've done a lot of work for World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, etc. And a lot of it was interesting, but nothing ever happened. So I'm enjoying being in raw materials because actually you can really make a difference in the real world to what happens there. But yes, so I come from a sort of a bit of an environment background. I did a lot of traveling in the Aussie tradition, worked for an NGO in Belize, and it got me setting up a marine reserve, which was fantastic, by the way. And it got me interested in the social aspects of development. So I came back to the UK and did a master's in development, and then worked with the British engineering companies. That was good because it was more practical aspects of water and energy and all of those sorts of things that can make a difference to people's lives. And I did, as I said, do a lot of work with the development agencies and got frustrated. And then I got the opportunity to join Thor Explorations as the environment and social manager, and here I am and loving it. I've been in the manager for 9 years, and I've been doing mining on consultancy and now on the operations side for about 20 years.
So, before we jump into Thor and where you're operating and what you're trying to create there, so Louise, it sounds like when you get frustrated or you think, hang on, I can't make a difference here, you move on and find something else. Is that a correct takeaway?
Yes, but it's not that I don't still have that same drive to make a difference and make a difference to people's lives and protect the environment. Just if I can see that it's not working, why stay with something? Sometimes it's too hard. And so I think for me, if the guiding line is environment and social, I move on still with that mindset, with that knowledge. And no matter where I've worked, you learn a lot. And I've learned a lot about people that they're the same no matter where. I've worked in 50 countries, so that's a lot to see different things. So I'm not a like jump ship. I've spent, 20 years in the engineering industry. But, and as I said, the practical side of it, I really liked. But that got me into mining where I thought, well, I can have more of an influence and be at the decision-making table to actually make those things happen for real, make it happen and influence decisions right from early days to change the trajectory of how the project is run and how it's operated.
So you have worked in a wide range of organizations. I know that we first met in the consultancy world, but I love the fact that you haven't just worked in the consultancy world, you do it as well. So you're taking your own advice, and especially now within Thor, actually making an opportunity a reality. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, when I joined Thor, we were laughing because we got a sort of bit of a break here at in the Indaba conference, and the CEO won the investment battlefield in 2017. So it meant that we got a stand in 2018. We had hardly any money. I was able to work with Sarah because we agreed that they couldn't pay me all the time, and I could work for other people. So that was great. Um, and so we had a stand. We couldn't even put the posters up on the wall. We were so amateur. And I still pop over to the junior miners and have a look and say, keep the faith because we're now been operating a mine for 5 years. So I moved in with Thor. I'm on part of the executive committee from early days. And eventually we did get the funding from Africa Finance Corporation. And my consultancy experience helped me with knowing the IFC performance standards and implementing those into from a client side, from an operator side. So that was actually quite good. And so we built it up from there. We did a DFS. Our first office was above a pub in West Hampstead, which was great fun. We sort of missed those days because you couldn't have a private conversation on the phone. You could hear everything, but in that way, it was good. And I suppose that's why we have a strong camaraderie and very proud of what we do. So we started to take on team very early, and I was able to take on a fabulous communities manager that will also speak, and an environment manager early days, and that was really important to have the local people in Nigeria that understood the culture, etc.
So with that, so what we've taken so far is Thor is a exploration mining company with an asset in Nigeria. But tell us more.
Okay, we've got more exploration going in Nigeria. And because last year was very good for mining companies and we've paid off our debt to our lenders, we were able to look more widely in West Africa and take up some more exploration licenses. So we've got 3 exploration licenses in Côte d'Ivoire. And in Senegal, we did own the exploration license for quite some time, but didn't have the funding to take it forward. And with having an operating mine and being unhinged from our debt, we were able to put a lot more money into that. So we've just completed our PFS for the Douta project in Senegal. We're right opposite Endeavour, and it's been good work, talking to them because we both need a good neighbour. And just had an EIA approved for there as well. So it's moving forward. We're looking to start construction next year and operations the year after and have a longer mining life on that and still keep going on the exploration in Côte d'Ivoire and continue sort of satellite pits around our existing Segilola mine because we've been about 4 years in operation. We've only got about another year and then about 18 months on the ROMPAD to process. And now with gold price being what it is, we're also looking to go underground, further underground in the existing pit, which seems to be a theme of sweating your existing asset for as much as you can get out of it. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. And it also means that you're not disturbing fresh land, etc. as well. If you've got, you're really making sure you're extracting what's there and those existing assets. But so Thor is a gold mining company,
Yes.
is that correct? And so that's a case of going from not very much to being able to pay off your debts in less than 10 years. 3 years. Amazing. Um, my apologies. In 3 years, that's phenomenal. But a key aspect of that as well, just from a sustainability perspective. So obviously you coming in really quite early and influencing perhaps some of those early decisions. Are there any key things that you made sure were put in place right from the start to make sure either we tee ourselves up for success or we proactively manage some of those risks that you've seen happen elsewhere?
Yeah. I'll do two. I'll do one from the environment perspective and one from the social perspective. So in the DFS, we found that Nigeria was using compressed gas, which to stop it flaring from the oil industry, and a company had set that up to not LPG but compressed gas, and we knew they were using that in industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, and we worked out that um, if we moved to that from diesel, we could reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 26%. And actually, in the longer run, it was cheaper to run. And we walked the talk. So we did that. So we still have a bit of diesel and we still have a lot of ugly trucks that are very polluting, unfortunately. But it's good to do something rather than nothing. You could sit back and say we can't do anything, but I'm really glad that we walked the talk on that one. And also, I think probably more importantly, in bringing on a social manager, we had to work with the communities because a lot of in Nigeria, local government doesn't really operate. They don't have much money. And a lot of the communities don't feel that a colonially imposed legislative experience is for them, but they have a strong respect for their cultural governance aspects. So we decided to go with that. And the government asks for community development agreements. And we went in to do those community development agreements. And I had to constantly remind the others on the executive committee that it wasn't a quick 6-week fix, it was an 18-month fix. So it was good to take the slack off the people on the ground to say, it's okay, I've got your back. I know it's going to take time. Even I know that sort of sounds a bit funny, but it's actually really important to give them time to actually build up that trust with the community. And that's paid dividends long term. And I'm really proud of what we've done for responsible mining with regard to community benefits that we've done, the trust that we've built up with them, and we wouldn't have a project without them. And 30% of our workforce is from the mines, from the communities around us. We built during COVID. We're saying, why don't we start a mine in a new jurisdiction during a global pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the best things was that we had to leave and the locals built it and they're so proud of it. And I think it actually, in retrospect, there was a real advantage. So we've got good, strong community support. I think of all the projects I've worked on, this is the one where we really do have the social license to operate, but you've got to keep on the ball for that. And so getting those things involved and giving people the space and the time without putting them under too much pressure to get it done quickly really has helped us to keep going as long as we have done. It's been good.
And so what about thinking to the future? Because there's only so much rock in the ground. Are you building this primarily for the mine, or are you building this for the future? What's the ambition?
I mean, that's the hard part, isn't it? You can't do your CSR and your compensation if you don't have something to pay for it. So we are in a commercial business for sure. And we've only have a mine life of about 6 years. So we're looking at doing what we call mine rehabilitation now, doing a lot of training with communities, trying to get them more into businesses that we've helped set up to do that, and capacity build them to make decisions. But it is going to be hard. We're just about to go through the mine purchase because we rented the land on the advice of government, and that's going to be a tough one. I've just raised questions at a conference breakfast this morning about land as a mining turning land into a commodity when actually it has a spiritual and a cultural aspect. And by even mapping it, you turn it into a commodity. And we're putting Western views on people that don't have that. So what can we do about, we're looking at sort of innovative ways where they can still have an interest in the land, you ask any Nigerian where their family's from, and they will tell you.
Yeah.
That's still that deep rooted. Whereas for us, we've moved around a bit. It's not the same thing. So we're just trying to work out how we can still keep that interest in there. Maybe still only take the land that's incapable of reuse, but then whatever use we put on, can we make it a cooperative where there's some share in what the profits are, so they still feel that there's some semblance of an aspect of the land? And I think it's going to be a difficult question moving forward, not just for us, but as mining becomes bigger in more difficult locations, with this aspect still keeping coming up, we've got to think through some of those difficult things for the longer term of how we can still keep that spiritual, cultural reverence for the land that maybe we don't understand enough.
Um, yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. If you had the opportunity to go back to this patch of land that is currently in operation right now in, say, 50 years, what do you hope you would find?
I'd hope I'd find sort of agro industries that could really make some money, that with a higher skill set that they can use. I hope to find that the communities are still thriving and with other skills, with the location, and have moved more into not necessarily mining, but another skill set, so they've got a strong economic base. I hope that the communities are more vocal in how their communities are run and investment into the communities. Um, Personally, I'd love it if the cultural governance actually took over the role of local government, because I think that would work better than that's a shift, but I think it would work better than if local government isn't working, then go with something that is. That's what I'd really like to see, because then they're managing their own community and their own destiny and the infrastructure that goes in it, and they live and work there. So they're more approachable, and they're more responsible to their community.
And then broadening this out to the world as a whole. So obviously there are some things that might work in Nigeria that wouldn't work elsewhere, but there are some underlying principles and themes that perhaps historically within the mining sector we haven't been very good at acknowledging them, or even where they've been taking place we haven't necessarily recognized them. Are there any key aspects that you'd like to highlight on the topic of responsible raw materials from a global perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking this morning about sort of nature and getting nature back on some of these sites. And that's something that I picked up as a child in a coal mining community. I think we've got to look at, certainly mine closure and bonds can help with that. But right from the outset, thinking more carefully about how much land you use, and thinking about, engineers love to see vacant land and we clear it off, and I'm trying to stop them doing that. And what can work on tailings dams, etc., to make them, bring them back in some economic use. So thinking environment from practically, not just theoretically or on a spreadsheet, right from the outset, I think would be a good way to go, and encouraging rehabilitation as you go. And I think certainly involving the community in the decision making, even of what the uses could be after that. What are they going to get out of mining? It has a shelf life, and what they think it could be used for afterwards. So to not necessarily lose some of those skills that they've got, that they become so overskilled, they don't lose that ingenuity, which I think they have now, and help think about, they know the land better than we do in lots of ways. And that's why I think sometimes farmers and geologists get along, because they love the dirt and the earth and everything. And if you can get the geologists to get their hands out of their pockets and sort of talk a bit more confidently, when you see that interaction, I'm like, there's a bit more respect between one another. But sort of think through what can happen after that. And maybe we've got to rethink mining. Do we really need a big hole in the ground? And I remember a lady from De Beers saying, can't we just sort of drill underneath? I was like, she's sort of got a point. So I think the brave thing would be to use AI and new techniques to stop this. We're in gold, we're about per ounce. And when you look at the large amount of rock that's removed to get 1 ounce of gold because it's worth it, we've got to think a bit differently. Is there another way that we could change without having to move all of that earth out in the first place. Our hanging wall's only about 1 metre wide, but our pit's about 400 metres wide because we have to for safety. We need to rethink that. We really do. Now's the time. Now's the time to do that. The environment is better. The communities can still have their land, and we haven't got a big hole in the ground.
Beautiful vision. With that, thank you very much, Louise. Absolutely great speaking to you today.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
So that was my conversation with Louise. And for me, this is one of those episodes that really brings the conversation about responsible raw materials down to earth. Because it is so easy to talk about sustainability in abstract terms. It is much harder to actually deliver it, especially in complex real-world environments. One of the things that really stood out to me is Louise's journey from frustration to action. She talks about working in development and consultancy roles where, despite good intentions, it often felt like not much was actually changing on the ground. And that decision to move into mining, to be part of the process, to influence decisions early, to actually make things happen, that's an incredibly powerful shift. It's a reminder that where you sit in the system really matters. Another theme that comes through strongly is the importance of starting early. Whether it's environmental decisions like switching fuel sources to reduce emissions, or social decisions like investing time in building relationships with communities, these are things that have far more impact when they're embedded from the beginning. And that sounds obvious, but in practice, it's often not what happens. There's also a really important point around time and patience. The example of community development agreements taking 18 months rather than a quick 6-week process is a good illustration of this. Because trust isn't something you can rush. And yet, in an industry driven by timelines, budgets, and investor expectations, there's often pressure to do exactly that. What's interesting is that, in this case, taking that time has actually paid off, resulting in stronger relationships, greater local involvement, and what Louise describes as a genuine social license to operate. And that's not just a nice to have, it's fundamental to the success of the project. Another part of the conversation that really stayed with me is the discussion around land. The idea that by mapping and defining land, we can inadvertently turn something that has deep cultural and spiritual meaning into a commodity. And that's quite a challenging concept, because it forces us to question some of the assumptions that underpin how we operate. And it highlights the need to think differently about ownership, about value, and about how benefits are shared. The idea of creating ongoing relationships with land through cooperatives or shared value mechanisms is a really interesting one. It's not straightforward, but it's exactly the kind of thinking that's needed as mining moves into more complex and sensitive environments and expectations. Looking ahead, I think the vision Louise sets out is both practical and ambitious. On the one hand, it's about very tangible things: rehabilitation, alternative livelihoods, building local capacity, and ensuring that communities continue to thrive after mining ends. On the other, it's about fundamentally rethinking how we mine. Do we always need large open pits? Can technology help us extract resources in less invasive ways? Can we design mining operations that leave a much lighter footprint? These aren't easy questions, but they're the right ones to be asking. And perhaps most importantly, this conversation reinforces the idea that responsible mining isn't just about minimizing harm. It's about actively creating positive outcomes, economically, socially, and environmentally. That's a much higher bar. But, as Louise's experience shows, it is not impossible. It just requires intention, effort, and a willingness to challenge the way things have always been done. And that, ultimately, is what responsible raw materials is all about. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.